Are we at a situation now that this has come to the States where we are going to see a sort of a new wave, a tipping point here in getting these drugs and vaccines on the market?
We reached a tipping point with this when this outbreak was realized that this outbreak was out of control, and we started to see things getting moved into phase 1 trials that were just at the cusp. Things like ZMapp, things like the Tecmira product, things like the Canadian vaccine. All of these have been pushed forward, not necessarily because of this American case, but prior to that. And this has really been a long development since the events of September 11 to develop countermeasures against Ebola.
What kind of timeline are we talking about here? We know that typically it's a really lengthy product, you know, from discovery to actually getting drugs in a plentiful way in the marketplace. What are we looking at in this case in terms of realistic timeline?
Realistically, to have these drugs and vaccines in ample supply is probably going to be on the scale of months to a year or so before we can have that capacity. This won't be what's going to stop the outbreak this time. This may change the face of how we deal with Ebola outbreaks in the future, but this outbreak is going to be stopped using tried and true public health principles that have worked in every other Ebola outbreak.
And I know a lot of it is prevention, a lot of it is identifying it early, and that is good old-fashioned before you even get to the point of pharmaceuticals. I know that the drug industry and the FDA and officials around the world are going as fast as they can. I mean, they've speeded up the process from what we are hearing. Is there a risk in an attempt to address this dangerous disease that we don't do the due diligence that we normally do, that we get things out quickly in order to save people that may end up having unforeseen circumstances? Are you at all concerned about that?
It's definitely important to make sure that we don't cut corners, that informed consent is obtained for these patients who are getting experimental drugs, that we try to collect safety data. These drugs have been used in non-human primates like monkeys multiple times and have had good results, but sometimes safety signals occur in humans that may not necessarily appear in earlier studies. And it's also that the fact that these have only been given to a small number of patients. When you give them to large numbers of patients, new side effects may emerge, and it's important that we track those. However, I don't think that we should delay in trying to get these drugs to people because the data is very promising and we have mechanisms in place. For example, the FDA has something called the emergency use authorization, which we exercised during 2009 during the H1N1 pandemic to bring a new antiviral to market early. And I think those are the kind of approaches that we're going to need to deal with this outbreak and with other infectious disease outbreaks in the future.
Doctor, we've been working really hard at CNN to make sure that we don't spread panic, that we inform our viewers. In terms of what you've seen for infectious disease, is this the kind of disease that you can adequately adjust through vaccine? Or is it one of those that just is hard to pin down, it morphs, it changes quickly, and that there's going to be a risk that vaccines even won't be enough? Where does this fall on that line?
We have vaccines in development that have shown really great results in animal models, and they've been given to a couple humans in trials, and we're starting this big trial at the NIH. I do believe that we will be able to control Ebola with vaccines once we get the appropriate vaccine. The challenge will be to make sure that the vaccine is effective against all strains of Ebola. There are, 4 strains that infect humans and cause disease, and the vaccine needs to be tailored to that specific strain. But I do believe that this is something that could be theoretically controlled with a vaccine and change the face of how we deal with Ebola in the future.